Chapter 1 of The Expedition of the Donner Party and Its Tragic Fate. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Alana Jordan. The Expedition of the Donner Party and Its Tragic Fate by Eliza P. Donner Houghton. Chapter 1. The Pacific Coast in 1845. Speeches of Senator Benton and report of Captain Fremont. My father and his family. Interest awakened in the new territory. Formation of the first immigrant party from Illinois to California. Preparations for the journey. The start. On the outskirts of civilization. Prior to the year 1845, that great domain lying west of the Rocky Mountains and extending to the Pacific Ocean was practically unknown. About that time, however, the spirit of inquiry was awakening. The powerful voice of Senator Thomas H. Benton was heard, both in public address and in the halls of Congress, calling attention to Oregon and California. Captain John C. Fremont's famous topographical report and maps had been accepted by Congress, and 10,000 copies ordered to be printed and distributed to the people throughout the United States. The commercial world was not slow to appreciate the value of those distant and hitherto unfrequented harbors. Tales of the equable climate and the marvelous fertility of the soil spread rapidly, and it followed that before the close of 1845, pioneers on the western frontier of our ever-expanding republic were preparing to open a wagon route to the Pacific coast. After careful investigation and consideration, my father, George Donner, and his elder brother Jacob decided to join the westward migration, selecting California as their destination. My mother was in accord with my father's wishes and helped him to carry out his plan. At this time he was 62 years of age, large, fine-looking, and in perfect health. He was of German parentage, born of Revolutionary stock just after the close of the war. The spirit of adventure, with which he was strongly imbued, had led him in his youth from North Carolina, his native state, to the land of Daniel Boone, thence to Indiana, to Illinois, to Texas, and ultimately back to Illinois while still in manhood's prime. By reason of his geniality and integrity, he was widely known as Uncle George in Sangamon County, Illinois, where he had broken the virgin soil 2½ miles from Springfield, when that place was a small village. There he built a home, acquired wealth, and took an active part in the development of the country round about. Twice had he been married, and twice bereft by death when he met my mother, Tamsen Eustace Dozier, then a widow, whom he married May 24, 1839. She was a native of Newburyport, Massachusetts. She was cultured, and had been a successful teacher and writer. Their home became the local literary center after she was installed as its mistress. My father had 2 sons and 8 daughters when she became his wife, but their immediate family circle consisted only of his aged parents and Elitha and Leanna, young daughters of his second marriage, until July 8, 1840, when blue-eyed Frances Eustace was born to them. On the 4th of December, 1841, brown-eyed Georgia Ann was added to the number, and on the 8th of March, 1843, I came into this world. I grew to be a healthy, self-reliant child, a staff to my sister Georgia, who, on account of a painful accident and long illness during her first year, did not learn to walk steadily until after I was strong enough to help her to rise and lead her to a sand pile near the orchard, where we played away the bright days of 2 uneventful years. With the approaching winter of 1845, popular interest in the great territory to the west of us spread to our community. Maps and reports were eagerly studied. The few old letters which had been received from traders and trappers along the Pacific coast were brought forth for general perusal. The course of the reading society which met weekly at our home was changed, in order that my mother might read to those assembled the publications which had kindled in my father and uncle the desire to migrate to the land so alluringly described. Prominent among these works were Travels Among the Rocky Mountains, Through Oregon and California, by Lansford W. Hastings, and also the Topographical Report, with maps attached, by Captain Fremont, which has already been mentioned. The Springfield Journal, published by Mr. Allen Francis, appeared with glowing editorials strongly advocating emigration to the Pacific coast, and its columns contained notices of companies forming in southern and southwestern states, each striving to be ready to join the great overland caravan, scheduled to leave Independence, Missouri, for Oregon early in May, 1846. Mr. James F. Reed, a well-known resident of Springfield, was among those who urged the formation of a company to go directly from Sangamon County to California. Intense interest was manifested, and had it not been for the widespread financial depression of that year, a large number would have gone from that vicinity. The great cost of equipment, however, kept back many who desired to make the long journey. As it was, James F. Reed, his wife and 4 children, and Mrs. Keyes, the mother of Mrs. Reed, Jacob Donner, his wife, and 7 children, and George Donner, his wife, and 5 children, also their teamsters and camp assistants, 32 persons all told, constituted the first immigrant party from Illinois to California. The plan was to join the Oregon caravan at Independence, Missouri, continue with it to Fort Hall, and thence follow Fremont's route to the Bay of San Francisco. The preparations made for the journey by my parents were practical. Strong, commodious immigrant wagons were constructed especially for the purpose. The oxen to draw them were hardy, well-trained, and rapid walkers. 3 extra yoke were provided for emergencies. Cows were selected to furnish milk on the way. A few young beef cattle, 5 saddle horses, and a good watchdog completed the list of livestock. After carefully calculating the requisite amount of provisions, Father stored in his wagons a quantity that was deemed more than sufficient to last until we should reach California. Seed and seed implements for use on the prospective farms in the new country also constituted an important part of our outfit. Nor was that all. There were bolts of cheap cotton prints, red and yellow flannels, bright bordered handkerchiefs, glass beads, necklaces, chains, brass finger rings, earrings, pocket looking glasses, and divers other knickknacks dear to the hearts of aborigines. These were intended for distribution as peace offerings among the Indians. Lastly, there were rich stores of laces, muslins, silks, satins, velvets, and the like cherished fabrics, destined to be used in exchange for Mexican land grants in that far land to which we were bound. My mother was energetic in all these preparations, but her special province was to make, and otherwise get in readiness, a bountiful supply of clothing. She also superintended the purchase of materials for women's handiwork, apparatus for preserving botanical specimens, watercolors and oil paints, books and school supplies, these latter being selected for use in the young ladies' seminary which she hoped to establish in California. A liberal sum of money for meeting incidental expenses and replenishing supplies on the journey, if need be, was stored in the compartments of 2 wide buckskin girdles to be worn in concealment about the person. An additional sum of $10,000 cash was stitched between the folds of a quilt for safe transportation. This was a large amount for those days, and few knew that my parents were carrying it with them. I gained my information concerning it in later years from Mr. Francis, to whom they showed it. To each of his grown children my father deeded a fair share of his landed estate, reserving 110 acres near the homestead for us, 5 younger children, who in course of time might choose to return to our native state. As time went on, our preparations were frequently interrupted by social obligations, farewell visits, dinners, and other merrymakings with friends and kindred